Hello, and welcome all to Movie Hunter, the show that tracks down the quality of all sorts of movies. My name is Hunter, and today in the 55th episode, our target is Surf's Up, produced by Sony Pictures Animation and distributed by Sony Pictures Releasing. The idea for Surf's Up was said to first be in the works in 2002, before other Penguin movies came out, with there being a surplus of them during this time. Happy Feet released a year prior to this in 2006. Madagascar, which would launch the Penguins of Madagascar franchise, released in 2005. And a really successful documentary titled March of the Penguins, also released in 2005. A film featuring surfing penguins was already in production at Sony Animation, which was described to be West Side Story meets Romeo plus Juliet, which screenplay writer Chris Jenkins said wasn't a good idea, so the film was cancelled. So, Chris Jenkins represented the idea, but with a unique documentary angle, and in 2004, Ash Brannon and Chris Buck were announced to be directing the film, as well as the surfing brand Quicksilver announced as a creative consultant. Similarly, real-life surfers Kelly Slater and Rob Machado gave the animators feedback for how the waves should look, as well as voicing penguin versions of themselves. The film released on June 8, 2007, and made $153 million on a budget of $100 million. It was directed by Ash Brannon and Chris Buck, with the story by Chris Jenkins and Christian Darren. The screenplay was by Don Reimer, Ash Brannon, Chris Buck, and Chris Jenkins, and it was produced by Chris Jenkins. It was edited by Ivan Belancio, and the music was by Michael Dana. The cast includes Shia LaBeouf, John Heder, Jeff Bridges, Zoe Deschanel, Diedrich Bader, James Wood, Mario Catone, Dana Belben, Brian Posen, and Maddie Taylor. 10 years later, in 2017, the film would receive a sequel, though it was negatively received for its lack of faithfulness to the original. The film follows Cody, an aspiring surfer who idolizes a deceased surfer named Big Z, who visited his island in Antarctica when he was a kid and gave him a necklace. Cody lives with his brother Glenn and his mother, with his father being eaten by an orca, and he has a job sorting fish. When Mike, a talent scout, arrives at his island looking for participants in the 10th Big Z Memorial Surf-Off, Cody gets a chance to prove himself and joins. On the way, he makes a friend named Chicken Joe from Wisconsin, who is also competing. On the island, Cody falls in love with a lifeguard named Lonnie. He also makes an enemy with Tank, the winner of the past 9 competitions. When he sees Tank vandalizing Big Z's memorial, Cody challenges him to a surfing competition, only to lose and fall on a fire urchin, knocking him out. The lifeguard, Lonnie, rushes him to the middle of the island to her hidden friend named Geek, who heals Cody. Having lost his necklace and too embarrassed to go back, Cody is left unsure where to go. Geek finds his necklace and returns it, and having spotted a koa log, offers to make Cody a new surfboard. All the while, Chicken Joe searches for Cody. When they lose hold of the log, it rolls onto the beach that they find to have belonged to Big Z. Cody then realizes that Geek is Big Z, having faked his death after his first loss to Tank. Cody asks him to teach him how to surf, to which Big Z reluctantly agrees, but on the condition that Cody makes his own board first. When Cody crafts his first board, he doesn't listen to Big Z and rushes the process, resulting on the board breaking on impact. He runs off frustrated and talks with Lonnie, who it turns out is Big Z's niece, and he is inspired to try again when she tells him that he's the only one to make him come out of his hut. Cody crafts a new board a lot more carefully this time, however he still prioritizes winning. Meanwhile, Chicken Joe runs into cannibals who he gets not to eat him by feeding them food that he previously described as tasting like chicken. Big Z's lessons begin, but not on the water, with Cody not seeing the point. When Cody starts having fun though, that's when Big Z's lessons start seeming more relevant. When Cody asks him to watch him tomorrow at the competition, Big Z refuses, being too afraid to face his fans again. Cody meets with Chicken Joe for the competition, and the both of them make it to the finals, along with Tank. When Tank tries to sabotage Chicken Joe, Cody steps in and sends Tank and himself to a notoriously dangerous part of the ocean. Lonnie is able to save Tank, but Cody is nowhere to be seen. Secretly watching from the beach, Big Z is able to swoop in and saves Cody, taking him to the beach and revealing to the world that he is still alive. With that, Chicken Joe wins the competition and everyone goes surfing, not to win, but to have fun. I wanted to start by talking about the protagonist, Cody. The first thing that I noticed that I thought was pretty neat was the way in which Cody is introduced. He tells a story about how Big Z visited his island, and out of all the people gathered, walked up to him specifically and gave him what Cody says is a one-of-a-kind necklace. However, what's interesting here is that what we are shown is very different than what we are told. Cody says that Big Z walked right to him, but in actuality, Cody, being a curious kid, walks right up to him. Big Z then presents him with a necklace that Cody thinks is a one-of-a-kind, but we can see that it's just something he hands out to fans. In my mind, this does two important things. One, it plants an idea in the audience's mind about what the kind of movie this is. This isn't a chosen one kind of movie where the protagonist is specially chosen because they are special. Not to say that that kind of movie is bad, the trope can absolutely be done right, but that's not what this movie is going for. Secondly, it inspires Cody with a lot of optimism and desire to accomplish his goal, but also makes him not really know what to do when things don't work out. The plan has always been to be good at surfing, and when the competition comes into view, the natural stepping stone is to compete and win. When Tank is simply too good for him to compete given his lack of training, he's left really not knowing what to do. This leads into the rest of his character arc, as well as Big Z and his character arc. So let's talk about that now. Big Z, much like Cody, prioritized winning. He was the best and never lost, meaning that all he did was just win, and that was the goal. However, when Tank shows up and he lost, he wasn't sure what to do. He was unable to face his fans or even himself after losing, because all he had ever knew was winning. So he faked his death and lived alone in the middle of an island, only ever talking with his niece Lonnie, who took care of him. Over the years, he learned that surfing shouldn't be about winning, but about having fun. While most of this character arc happens before the movie begins, his arc is not yet complete, and much like he completes Cody's arc, Cody completes his arc. When Big Z goes to teach Cody surfing, he starts by not actually surfing at all, but rather doing things that are only vaguely related to surfing. At first, I thought this was going to fall into the trope of having these things be strangely related to surfing and end up being beneficial despite Cody's complaining. And once again, there isn't anything wrong with that, it can be done well, but the movie once again surprised me by not doing that. Big Z wasn't actually teaching Cody how to surf, but rather was having fun messing with him, until Cody starts having fun too and pranks Big Z back. Only then does Big Z actually teach him surfing, once he has made a solid foundation that he hopes will help avoid Cody having the same experience as he did. At this point, Big Z's character arc then progresses more, when Cody asks him to watch him compete in the surfing competition the following day. Upset that Cody still seems to only care about winning, and also afraid to face his past again, Big Z refuses, and the two go their separate ways. The next day, Cody competes in the competition, still determined to win, with Big Z secretly watching from afar. When he, Chicken Joe, and Tank make it to the finals, things are looking up, at least until Tank begins to cheat. He tries to eliminate Chicken Joe, but Cody without hesitation swoops in to save him, ultimately taking Tank and himself out of the competition. Big Z then completes his character arc by saving Cody and returning him to the island full of people, in the process revealing his faked death to the world. I'll admit this finale isn't as great as I would have liked, especially given the interesting setup, but it still does the job at the end of the day. I really like Big Z's character arc resulting in him prioritizing winning, because it simply is a better way to look at things, but also because he's afraid to be crushed again, because back when he only cared about winning, Big Z became crushed for years after his first loss. Cody has a pretty interesting arc too, with his desire to win being set up very interestingly, and Big Z showing him how to prioritize winning, being an interesting contrast to the Big Z that Cody initially meant. Overall, some pretty good character arcs. It can be rather simplistic and bare bones, but all in all, a pretty creative time that I found to be interesting. Now, I haven't had to do this in a while, and in fact, I think I've only ever done this once before, but I really don't have enough to say on these topics to make them their own unique sections. So this section is just going to compile the rest of my thoughts. First of all, I must absolutely mention the fact that this entire movie is committed to the bit of having it seem like a documentary. Everything is seen through the point of the camera crew. Characters will occasionally talk to the camera, and the crew will ask the characters questions. Not only does this lead to a lot of funny moments, but it also provides the film with a very unique tone that makes it stand out from the other Penguin movies that came out at this time. It also makes it stand out today, where it was one of the main reasons I wanted to check out this film in the first place. Getting into another reason I wanted to check out this film, Chicken Joe. Though the reason I wanted to check it out was actually because of his voice actor, Jon Heder, who played Napoleon Dynamite. Either way, Chicken Joe is a pretty great example of how to make a comedic relief. Though comedy is subjective, I think he was consistently funny throughout the film, making great use of characterization, timing, and subverting of expectations. What really sells it as a great comedic relief, however, is what he adds to the story. First of all, he doesn't take away from the main story. While his side story does take place in between scenes of the main plot, I never found it to interrupt important beats in the main story. It was always timed in a way that felt natural to return to his plot. Secondly, and perhaps most interestingly, the ending gives Chicken Joe a chance to support the main theme that was explored in the main plot. To the surprise of everyone, including probably the audience, Chicken Joe wins the competition, but it makes perfect sense for the film to make him ultimately win. He never cared about winning, only about having fun, and there's an especially charming message in the simple line about Chicken Joe not even initially realizing that he had won. Overall, Chicken Joe is just peak side character. Moving on to Tank, the antagonist of the film, he does a pretty good job, though there is one missed opportunity. I really liked him throughout the film. Being excessively rude to everyone and flexing his massive ego makes for some really funny moments. So overall, a good character, I'd argue, and one that's easy to root against as well. However, I feel like that it was a real missed opportunity to present a full circle moment in which Tank underwent a similar character arc as Big Z did when he first lost. But other than that, a good character. Lonnie is easily the weakest link here, with her really not providing much to the story, and by the end, I feel like she more or less could have been cut from the film entirely. It seems like they were going to introduce some sort of plot where she's upset over the fact that she had tried and failed to get Big Z out of his hut for years, only for Cody to show up out of the blue and succeed, but they never do. Ultimately, she's rarely ever annoying in the film, but just felt unnecessary at the end of the day. Finally, I'd like to mention that I really liked the bird character, Mikey, who was ultimately a minor character in the film, but was still a fun character throughout, and he has a really satisfying moment in the end when he's able to get back at his boss, Reggie. And that about wraps up my random thoughts. I give Surf's Up an 8 out of 10 for being an extremely solid film. I feel like with some fine-tuning, it easily could have reached a 9 out of 10. But the film not exploring everything it brings up, with the film not exploring everything it brings up to its fullest, in my opinion. Cody and Big Z both have fun and complementary character arcs. Chicken Joe makes for a great side character, and the entire movie committing to the bit of being a mockumentary is hilarious. Overall, this is a really fun film that I'd recommend, and I'm glad I checked out. Well, that's all, folks. I hope you enjoyed, and feel free to share any opinions you had on the movie. A new episode releases each week, so stay tuned to see which film I cover next. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.